Hello and welcome to today's session where we're going to talk about PowerCLI and the REST APIs and the new approach that we're taking towards the REST APIs in PowerCLI. Uh, the agenda for today's session. First, we're going to start with what are the PowerCLI SDK modules, why to use them, and how to do that. And of course, we're going to show you some very interesting demos with two different APIs and how to use the new PowerCLI SDK modules to call API operations from those APIs. My name is Kamen Nikolov, and I am R&D manager for PowerCLI at VMware, and also a vExpert. You can find me on Twitter, where I'm sharing all the latest news about PowerCLI, all the information about different PowerCLI related releases, and all the events that we're organizing, and so on. So let's get started. What are the PowerCLI SDK modules? Uh, I'm going to start from the very beginning with a little bit of theory around the APIs and the API consumption in PowerCLI. Um, PowerCLI is a client application which communicates to the other VMware products through their APIs. And different VMware products have different APIs, so PowerCLI communicates with them in a different way. Um, Probably the best known example is Vsphere and how PowerCLI communicates with its APIs. Vsphere has two APIs: the Vsphere Management Api, which is the old SOAP API, and here PowerCLI communicates with this API through SOAP, and PowerCLI exposes this API through the getView commandlet. So the way that we expose this API through the getView commandlet is more like an object-oriented way, and not so much a PowerShell friendly way. So it is a bit different from the high-level commandlets that we have, which are manually written, like get VM, get VM hosts, get cluster, and so on. So all of those are manually written, but everything around get view is automatically generated, but it gives you the full exposure of the API. So the Vsphere Management API is organized around the so-called managed objects. So this is what getView returns. It returns you some objects, and you can browse through the properties of these objects, which is the full property set of the API, and you can call different methods of these objects, which again are all the API operations available for the certain managed object. The other Vsphere API is the Vsphere Automation Api. It has two representations, so it can be accessed through two different technologies. It can be accessed through Json Rpc, or it can be accessed through REST. So first, we added in PowerCLI the way to access it through Json Rpc, and this is the getCIS service commandlet. Here we're also showing some object-oriented representation of this API. GetCIS service returns the so-called service objects, and for every service object you can call different methods. And when you have to pass some complex objects, there is also a mechanism to build those complex objects to fill their properties so that you can pass them to the methods of the service object. Again, this is more like object-oriented methods and not so much the native PowerShell way of doing stuff. And we have seen that this is not the easiest way for our customers, and it's not very intuitive way to call those APIs. So that's why we have added a new way to call the same Vsphere Automation API, but this time through the REST interface. So we're using a generator which consumes the REST API the REST API documentation and the REST API definition, and we generate out of it PowerShell commandlets for every API operation. One example of such commandlet is invoke create VM. I'm going to explain a little bit in more details about how the names of these commandlets are formed. So we're doing that for the Vsphere Automation API. We're doing the same thing for the Nsx Policy API, and we're planning to do that for many other REST APIs that we have in VMware. Um, so let's summarize. We have these PowerCLI SDK modules that allow us to call different VMware REST APIs. We have started with the Vsphere Automation API and the Nsx Policy API, and these commandlets, they are integrated with PowerCLI. So where applicable, you can reuse the existing connect commandlets. For example, for the Vsphere Automation API, it is integrated with Connect VI Server, so you don't need to handle the authentication, but these SDK modules, they handle the authentication for you. So once you do a Connect VI Server, you can after that call the API operations from the SDK modules. And of course, it's all part of PowerShell. With all the benefits that come from that, all these modules are cross-platform, so you can use them on all the supported operating systems that PowerShell supports, etc. So the next question is, why use those PowerCLI SDK modules, and what are the benefits that we get from them? First of all, we have to ask the question, what made it possible for us to create those SDK modules? And this is the adoption of REST APIs in VMware, and the adoption of a single API definition format, which is Open API. So that allowed us to use to create a generator, and to use that generator to create commandlets to automatically create commandlets for those APIs. And what are the benefits of this automatic generation of commandlets for the REST APIs of the VMware products? So the first benefit is that we're able to add more products quickly. So this auto generation allows us to add more products and to give our users the full access to the API. These commandlets are different from the manually written commandlets, as I told you, like get VM, new VM, and so on. But here we can quickly give access to the full API, so all the API operations are available through those SDK modules. We're not abstracting the APIs all that much. It is just a one-to-one binding to the API. So you need to use the API objects, and you need to use the API documentation to find the information about the operations and how to invoke them, what to pass to them, and so on. But you have the full coverage. You have a wider coverage with more VMware products coming up, and with this automatic generation. You can easily call those APIs through PowerCLI. Next question is how to use those SDK modules. So first of all, we need to figure out how we build the commandlet names for the different API operations. The way we do that is that we use the invoke commandlet verb, and then for the commandlet noun, we use the API operation name. So if the API operation is called create VM, the commandlet will be called invoke create VM. And sometimes those commandlets have simple input. For example, some strings, integers, booleans, and so on. We translate those automatically to commandlet parameters. But when these commandlets have some complex object that needs to be passed as an input, we're also creating some helper commandlets. These commandlets will use the initialize verb to help us create the client-side objects that we need to pass to the invoke commandlets. For example, with the create VM operation, we need to create an object which is called VM create spec. And here we have a commandlet which is called initialize VM create spec, which helps us create this input object that we later pass to the invoke create VM commandlet to actually invoke the API operation. What we need to underline here is that initialize commandlets do not perform any operations on the server. So they only create client-side objects that we later pass to the invoke commandlets as an input. Um, so the next question is how do we write scripts with those SDK modules? How do we automate some workflows? And the key to this is to figure out which API operations we need to call. Then we need to figure out which PowerCLI commandlets correspond to those API operations. And there are generally two ways to do that. If we're familiar with the API and the API operations, the first part is clear. We already know which API operations we need to execute in order to automate the workflow that we need. So we just need to figure out which PowerCLI commands match to those API operations. And I'll show you in the demo how to do that. We can do that from the documentation or for some of the modules. We also have an additional methods to do that. If we're not familiar with the API operation, we have to do some searching. So we can search online for the API operation that we need. When we find the API operation, we examine the documentation, and again we get to the PowerCLI example and the PowerCLI commandlet that we have to use. Then when we know the PowerCLI commandlets, all that is left is to write the script, run it, and that's it. We have integrated with the API documentation so that for some of the APIs like the Vsphere Automation Api or the Nsx Policy Vmc Api, when you open the documentation for a certain API operation, you can scroll down and you can see the PowerCLI client SDK example, where this is where you can see what the PowerCLI commandlet is for this operation, what parameters it takes, and how to build those parameters if you need to call any initialize commandlets to create some complex objects for this operation or not, etc. For some other APIs that are using different documentation formats, we're still not there. We don't have the PowerCLI examples in the API documentation yet. Such case is the Nsx Policy on-prem documentation, but there I'll show you we have different ways to do the matching between the API operations and the PowerCLI commandlet. Okay, now we've come to the interesting part, the demos. The first demo is going to be a demo for Vcenter local accounts. In this demo, we're going to first list the local account that we have defined on our Vcenter server appliance. Then we're going to create a new account. on the VCVA. We're going to change some of its properties, and at the end, we're going to delete it. So as I said, the first thing that we need to figure out is which API operation we need to invoke. So first, we have to find the operation to list the local accounts on the VCVA. So we can search for Vsphere local account list local accounts REST. And here we can see that the first result is a reference to the Vsphere appliance REST API. So this is the API operation. Here we can see information about this API operation. We can see the HTTP method. We can see the URL of the operation. We can see different parameters. In this case, there are some authentication parameters, but we don't need to take care of them. The PowerCLI SDK modules will take care of all the authentication. And if we scroll down, we'll see the PowerCLI client SDK example. And we're going to see that the command that corresponds to this API operation is invoke list local accounts. So now let's go back to our script. And now that we know which commandlet we have to execute in order to get the information about the local accounts. So first, as I said, we need to do a connect VI server. This is a well-known PowerCLI commandlet to connect to Vsphere. We have to enter the username and the password. And then we're going to establish a connection. And after that, the PowerCLI SDK module will take care of the authentication for every API operation that goes to the server. Now let's go and call the invoke list local accounts commandlet. And here we'll see that it will return 2 local accounts. So currently we have one local account which is root and another one which is SSO user. So the next thing that we want to do is we want to create a new local account. To do that, we need to first figure out what is the API operation that we have to use. So we'll go back to the API documentation and we'll scroll back up. And here on the right-hand side, we're going to see the related operations. So related to the list local accounts operation, we have operations that create local account, operations that update the local account, the one that deletes local accounts, and so on. So let's go and select the create local accounts operation. And we'll see the details for this operation. Again, we're going to just scroll down to the PowerCLI client SDK example. And here we're going to see that the commandlet that we need to invoke in this case is invoke create local accounts. But unlike the list operation, here this operation takes a complex object as an input. So we're going to need those initialize commandlets that I told you about earlier to initialize the input for the invoke create local accounts operation. So we're going to use those initialize operations to initialize the username, the role, and the password of our account that we want to create. Here we go. And now we already have the input object. Now when we call the invoke create local accounts, this is the moment that we actually invoke the server operation, and now the new user is created. Now we're going to use another operation, which is get username local accounts, which takes the username as an input. and provides us with the full details of our user that we have created. So we're going to invoke this command. And here we can see the full details. We can see that the role of our user is operator. We can see that its password will expire every 90 days. And we can see the last time the password was changed and the next time that the password will expire. So now we want to make a change in this policy. First, we want to be able to change the password itself, and then we want to change the password expiration policy and specify that the password will not expire. So to do that, we're going to use the update username local accounts operation, which is called with the invoke update username local accounts commandlet. And again, we have this initialize commandlet to build the input for the operation. And in the input, we're going to specify the new password and that the password will not expire. So when we invoke the operation, and if we now call the get username local accounts to see the details of the user again, we're going to see that the password of the user now will not expire. And we're also missing the two fields that were telling us when the password will expire. So our user was updated successfully. And the last operation that I want to show you is the invoke delete username local accounts operation. We're asked for confirmation. And now if we try to retrieve the user again, we're going to get an error message that this user no longer exists because it was deleted. Next, let's move to the Nsx module. We have introduced this module for calling the Nsx Policy REST API, and again, it is using absolutely the same concept as the module that is used for the Vsphere Automation Api. The same naming of the commandlets, and it contains more than 4,000 commandlets that cover all the API operations and data structures in the Nsx Policy API. It is one module that is used for both, that can be used for both on-prem and VMC instances. It has different connection methods, but other than that, the commandlets are the same. And we also have the PowerCLI examples integrated in the Nsx Vmc Policy Api documentation. For the on-prem, the Nsx team is using a different documentation format, and there we were not able to integrate our documentation. But I'll show you again how to do the matching between the API operation and the PowerCLI commandlet there as well. So now let's move on to the demo. In this demo, we're going to create Nsx network segments in our tier 1 gateway. Here, as I told you, it is one module that is available for both on-prem and VMC, but there are different connection methods. So the first example that you see is for connecting to a Vmc server. There we need to use connect Vmc server and pass the API token. Then we retrieve the SDDC. And then we do the actual NSX connection with connect NSX VMC server, and we pass the VMC connection and the SDDC. In our case, we're going to use an on-prem environment, and connection to the on-prem environment happens with connect NSX server, where we specify the server name, the username, and the password. So in this case, it is just one commandlet. While in the NSX, in the VMC use case, it is a little bit more complex. So the first thing to start, we have to do to establish a connection to our VMC server. And then we're going to list all the tier 1 gateways that we have in our environment. And then we're going to check what segments we have defined, and we're going to create a new segment. This is going to be the workflow of this demo. So let's start with connect NSX server. We're passing the username and the password. So now we have our connection established. The next thing that we want to do is we want to list all the tier 1 gateways in our environment. So again, to do that, we need to first figure out which API operation we want to invoke, and then we need to do the matching between the API operation and the PowerCLI commandlet. We said that we're connected to an on-prem instance. So let's go to the API documentation for the on-prem. It is available right through the UI of NSX. So we open the NSX API guide, and here we can search for tier 1 gateways. If we click on that, we're going to see all the API operations for tier 1 gateways. We can see the operation that lists all tier 1 gateways. We have operation to delete them, to read the details of a specific tier 1 gateway. We have operations to create new tier 1 gateways, and so on. We have to select the specific operation. In our case, we want to list all the tier 1 gateways, and here we can see all the details in the API operation. We can see the HTTP method, we can see the URLs, and we can also see the input parameters that we have to pass. So these are the different input parameters. Okay, so now how do we do the matching between this API operation and the PowerCLI commandlet? We have a commandlet for that, and it is called get NSX Operation. So let's do a get help for get NSX Operation and see what it takes as an input. So this commandlet takes as an input the HTTP method and the URL of the operation. It can also work the other way around. You can pass the PowerCLI command, and you can see the details of the API operation. You can see the HTTP method and the path. So it works both ways. So in our case, we want to do a get NSX operation, and we want to specify the HTTP method, which in our case is get. And we will also want to specify the path to the operation. Okay. And here we can see that the PowerCLI command is called invoke list tier 1. Now we can also do a get help for invoke list tier 1 and see what parameters this operation takes. Okay, here we can see all the different input parameters. They are all optional, as you can see, and we can also go right to the examples and see the different examples. The one that is only with the mandatory parameters, in this case there aren't any, and the other one which is with the full list of parameters. So now let's go ahead and do an invoke list tier 1. And here we can see that we have one tier 1 gateway, which is called CGW. The next thing is that we want to see what network segments we have for this tier 1 gateway. So here again, we need to do the matching between the API. We need to first figure out the API operation, and then we need to do the matching between the API operation and um, the PowerCLI command. And in this case, I'm going to show you the other way to do that using the Nsx Policy Api Documentation for VMC. This API documentation is available on developer.vmware.com. And in this operation, we have integrated the PowerCLI examples directly, as we have in the Vsphere Automation API documentation. So let's go to developer.vmware.com. Let's go to APIs, and now let's search to the NSX Vmc Policy API. Okay, it is this one, and now we need to find our API operation. So we're going to go to tier 1, and then we're going to go to segments, and we're going to search for list segments. Here it is. So this is the operation that lists all network segments for a tier 1 gateway. Now here we can see all the API documentation again with information about the API methods and also the parameters and everything. But here we can scroll down and just see the PowerCLI client SDK example. So we can see that in this case, the commandlet that we have to invoke is invoke list segments. And here we can also see all the parameters that we can pass to this commandlet. So even though we're using the NSX on-prem, we can still use the NSX VMC Policy API documentation. It's essentially the same API, or at least a subset of it, which is available in VMC. Some of the on-prem operations are not available in VMC, so you might not be able to find them there. And in this case, you'll have to deal with the on-prem documentation and get NSX operation. But other than that, it is easier to use the VMC documentation. So we invoked list segments, and we saw that we have no segments defined here in this environment. So the next thing is that we want to create a segment. And the API, the PowerCLI commandlet for that is invoke create or replace segment. It accepts the tier 1 ID and the segment ID of the segment that we want to create, but it also accepts a complex parameter of type segment. And here we have to go to initialize segment commandlet, where we specify the name and the subnets, and subnets themselves are another complex object. So we have to also call initialize segment subnet commandlet to fill this complex object. So with these two commandlets, we are filling the input for the invoke, create, or replace segment. Again, to underline, these initialize commandlets, they don't go to the server. They do not create anything on the server. I can show you now that if we call invoke list segments again, we still don't have any segments defined. So now let's call the invoke, create, or replace segment operation, which will actually perform the API operation and create the network segment. Now we're going to use invoke list segments again, and we can see that we now have one segment defined, which is called SDDC CGW network 2. And now we can also use invoke read segment, which will give us the details of a specific network segment. It accepts the segment ID and the tier 1 ID as parameter, and it returns us all the details of this network segment. And the last operation that I'm going to show you again is the operation that deletes a segment. It is called invoke delete segment, and it accepts the tier 1 ID and the segment ID as a parameter. And now if we try to read the segment again, we're going to see that it no longer exists, and we're getting an error message. If you want to see more details about how to use this NSX module with more examples, I definitely recommend this session by Madhukar Krishna Rao, which is explore the new PowerCLI for NSX. So go check out this session. It has more details and useful use cases. Another good source is a blog post also from Madhu on the NSX blog, which is called exploring the new PowerCLI module for NSX. So it also has a lot of details and a lot of useful information in there on how to use this new module to do some common tasks in NSX. So thank you, and I hope that this session was useful. Have a great day.